Naheed, welcome. It's lovely to have you here, and I'm really excited to speak to you about your debut novel. I have it right here with me. I
Thanks.
just absolutely loved it, and apart from it being like a really devastating conflict between mother and daughter, in a sense, it gave me so much perspective on our society in general. So I absolutely loved it, and a well-deserved shortlist nomination. So congratulations and welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here. I'm a big fan of the Bangalore Literature Festival and the Atta Galatta bookstore. And it feels so surreal to be on a shortlist with so many authors that I admire so much and for such a long time, for years before I even began writing. So it's definitely a thrill.
Wonderful, and it's great to have you here. I'd like to actually start off by asking you about this whole experience of actually putting out a debut novel, right? The first for anyone in any field is always special. And apart from like the creative and the professional commitment of actually writing a novel, the emotional investment that goes into it is huge. So I'd love for you to talk us through this experience of actually writing it and then seeing it on the stands, this whole journey.
Well, it's kind of like, the more I've been thinking about it, it's really like almost like having your own startup or something like that.
True.
As in, you kind of labor alone in the dark, and you have to kind of manage. Well, at the start, really, when I was doing my MFA 8 years ago, it's about just learning the craft and being able to just write a sentence and then write another sentence and another sentence after that and make sure that it starts making sense. And I think so much of the time has also gone into just it's really about at the start of it, it's really about quantity, because you have this idea and this I think it was Tanisi Coates who said, like, you have this music playing in your head, but then when you sit down at the piano and you try to play it, it comes out completely besura and terrible and sounds like so it's really about output, and kind of just the more you write, the better you get at it. And it really takes, it's like for every page that you write, you throw away, I would say, 10 pages. So it's really like, yeah, it's really like a gleaning of, and then of course, once you start learning how to write, then you have to kind of figure out, okay, now how do I plot, how do I make this into a story, how do I make this interesting for readers, what parts are people engaging with, what parts are turning people off, how interested am I in that interest, like. So it's a really multifaceted, but I think the short answer is that it's really just about sitting at the desk or at the laptop and just writing as much as possible, because the more you write, really the better you will get at it. And even today, like when I sit down and try to read my book, I can't read it because I start immediately editing it, and I'm like, oh, I should, this would be better. And like, I'm just, right now for the US edition, we're going through edits, and I just got the book back from copy edits, and there's such a strong urge to like change everything and add something else. And so it's a never ending, like you never stop feeling that need to improve, and it's endless, and at some point, like, I don't know who said it, but you don't finish a book, you abandon it. Like, you just say, okay, now enough, I have to move on to the next thing.
I'm done with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm done with it, because it's really like there's no end to how much you can just keep like, improving it. So
absolutely. And I think that is the case with all artists, all creative people, right? You're never really satisfied. That is the process also of growing as a writer and an artist. Now the main characters of your book are Asha and Numi, the mother and daughter, and they are so multi-layered and complex. And give us a little idea about how you actually conceived them in your head, and were they ruminating in your head much before you actually wanted to write the novel, and then they worked their way in? How did these characters evolve for you?
It's interesting because at the start of this journey, and when we were first figuring out how to talk about this novel, we really kind of my publishers and I kind of focused on the quote unquote mother-daughter relationship. But the more I've kind of gone back to the book and the more I've read it, I think the fulcrum, like the mother-daughter relationship, is one aspect.
Yes.
But I feel like it's really about her relationship with so many other characters in the book. Like I feel like the relationship with the father, Jay, is as vital to this character's development.
Yes.
What happens to her when she gets married is also like so it became a different thing for me. And with any book, I think that every character develops with each draft. So you write something and then somebody else points out, well, in my case at least, like because I was workshopping everything incessantly, like I had like 3 workshops in the MFA, then after that I joined like another workshop, and then I had like peers friends read it. So it's so many sets of eyes saw that book or saw that prose before it even became a book. Agents read it, editors read it, so it was just like every layer upon layer upon layer. So anyway, with any character, it's like somebody points out, well, why is this person doing what she's doing? Why is she like the mother character Asha in the earliest drafts was very one-dimensional, in the sense that she was just like evil, like she was just a bad, like a bad mom. And people wanted me, and people who read the book wanted me to complicate that, and like, why is she like that? What is driving her to be a bad mother? Why is she so then you start thinking more and more, and you give it more thought, and you kind of complicate, or you kind of disrupt the tropes of the evil mother, or and the same with Numi. Like a lot of people have told me that Numi is unlikable, and it was very much a decision. I felt like it would have been dishonest to make her perfectly likable or a perfect victim, because then she would have no nuance.
Absolutely.
Then she, her unlikability in a way is also her agency, because she is pushing up against societal expectations. She's pushing up against our notions of how women should behave, that they should be nurturing, caring, loving. And also she kind of pushes, I think she's really important because she pushes the limits of a reader's empathy. And a reader might find that, well, they do not have the empathy to spare to kind of understand or walk a mile in this character's shoes, which is also interesting. Like they can ask themselves why.
Yes.
And then there's some people who absolutely loved her. They thought she was hilarious and she's really wicked and funny. So it's been like, I didn't want to protect any of my characters. I didn't want to kind of be dishonest in the prose, or be like, oh, I'm not going to let anything bad. I'm not going to let this character do anything bad. Like I want everyone to love this character.
Yes.
So I didn't feel like that would have been. So yeah, so it was a choice on my part. I don't think I could have written it any other way.
True, which is actually a perfect lead up to the question I was going to ask. These characters, both these women, apart from being so layered, are deeply flawed. They made mistakes. They've taken terrible decisions that have had grave consequences in their lives. But in a sense, it actually humanizes them for the readers, at least for me. It made me understand why they were like that, and judge them accordingly, or to make my own decisions about who they were. But then was, at any point did you have that little voice in your head like urging you to say, I want to defend them, I want to validate their actions? Did you go through that phase before actually saying, no, I don't want to do this to them?
It's really funny. I think it comes down to a personality. I think whether you like it or not, some of your personality does rub off on your prose, on your book, on your novel.
Right.
And I've always been a kind of very, like, friends have always told me, like, I'm a very honest, very upfront person. Like, I'll say it as it is, and I never kind of cushion things or sweeten things or make things sound, and for better or for worse. And I feel like it's just not my personality to kind of cushion the blow, to make things more palatable.
Yes.
I mean, definitely, I don't want to insult anyone, or I don't want to, like, make people feel I want to make them feel a little uncomfortable. Like, that's also the point. Like, you should feel uncomfortable reading, because it kind of evokes something in you. But I guess it's just not in my nature to kind of I don't know how to put it, to really kind of sweeten anything.
Yeah, because I absolutely connected with that, because like to take off on what you said before, you didn't want to give them this one-dimensional evil image. The reason they are like that is because of so many things they faced in life, and for the readers to actually make that decision about who they are was really nice. And also the fact that in a sense, society kind of like puts these labels on who women should be, right? Like a woman is only complete if she has a child, and that is the most enriching experience for her. And these virtues of a mother being self-sacrificial, unconditional love, a daughter's best friend. These are all like what society has dictated as about what mothers and daughters maybe should be like in the relationship between them.
Yeah.
Was that also your way of kind of busting that stereotype and kind of saying, every woman need not want to be a mother or love children, or so something that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I think that's a really that's a really good question. I think that in a way, the mother's character Asha, she is able to be maternal, but she's not able to be maternal to her
daughter. Exactly.
Own
she's
child.
Not maternal to her daughter. Yeah.
Own child. Yeah. So it's also like, okay, but sometimes you can. I'm sorry. I think there's a cross. Okay. No. Yeah, it's fine. Sometimes it's also about where you can direct that, or what stops you from being a mother to your own child, or a parent to your own child, right? And I feel like a lot of the quote unquote maternal qualities that we're looking for in a mother is actually present in the father. Like, he is very nurturing, nourishing, and gentle. All the qualities that you expect in a woman is actually present in this man. And so Numi my protagonist has a very close relationship with her father. But as you read the book, you realize that's also not enough to protect her or to keep her, kind of even that kind of falls short. So it's really about, like, how much we rely on parental love or parental protection to kind of mold us or make sure that we don't screw up. And how there were various tropes, obviously, that I was trying to kind of bust. But also I feel that, recently things have changed, but women really don't have the permission to be flawed. We don't have the permission to be messy. And seeing a messy character on screen or on the page is still a moment of, like, whoa, what's going on here? Like, why isn't she being perfect, in some way or the other? Why isn't she just rising above adversity and being, so we do have these preformed expectations in our mind, because we've been conditioned by society for women to hide their flaws, like, whether they're physical or they're mental or anything like that. And I think that was really important for me to just show women, first of all, to foreground women, and then also to show them as these highly flawed, highly fallible beings.
Absolutely. And also your other themes that you've worked through in the film, which actually takes off from what you've said, is the fact that in the 21st century we still have patriarchy very much prevalent in our society, irrespective of the kind of family that you come from, and the double standards that we see when it comes to judging men and women with their actions, And if you see in the book, it's the parts where Numi's family is technically the liberal, open kind of family, whereas Veer's family is your typical joint family, Punjabi setup. But then in both cases, if you look at it, Numi as well as Acha herself is, her problems are brushed under the carpet and she's taken for granted by her own father-in-law.
Yeah.
Whereas Numi is also taken for granted by, and these are two different generations. So in a sense, is it important to talk about the fact that, these patriarchy and all these conflicts still exist for us? And do you think that there's a lot more conversation about this today with writers and, with the kind of stuff that they put out, the writing that they put out?
Yeah, I think that the fact that patriarchy exists goes without saying, and I don't think that we need a book like mine to kind of prove that. But I think that what the book does is it kind of tries to talk about how patriarchy kind of, first of all, how it affects both men and women.
Women, yes.
And it is there are many instances in the book where the patriarchal notion or something is actually the women are the enforcers rather than the men.
Yes.
So, and the other thing is also about like the two families. So, Veer is Numi's love interest and fiance and husband. And he comes, as you said, from a traditional, very traditional kind of hierarchical family. So in their case, the patriarchy is kind of in your face, like they're very clear rules and they're very obvious sets of expectations. In Numi's family's case, they're on the surface more, like you said, liberal. But even in their case, the whole log kya kahenge and what will people say, and women should behave a certain way. That notion of that messaging is extremely subliminal, but it's very prevalent. And so Asha constantly fails to meet those expectations of how a daughter-in-law should behave and how she's kind of punished for that. And there's no real, I mean, there's only blame in the sense that, even though she does have a mental illness, there is no compassion or like, we should help you. It's more like you are bringing shame on us.
Absolutely.
At every step of the way. So that there are many levels at which patriarchy works, I think, and it's not always on the most obvious or most in your face way. There are many registers on which it plays.
Absolutely. And talking about Numi's father, Jay, who's actually a really wonderful character and her biggest support system, is he in a sense also part of this whole patriarchal notion? Because he isn't a patriarch on your face.
No, he isn't.
He's a victim of his own circumstances. But even when Numi tells him about Veer's family and, the fact that she's expected to be a particular kind of woman for them, that fits into their family, so he doesn't really, he says, come on, Numi, it's okay, you just go with the flow and stuff. So isn't he also propagating patriarchy in a sense?
Yeah. So that's a really good point, right? Like, even though he himself is not, and even Veer for that matter, both these characters are not really your quintessential
not at all.
Misogynistic men. They're very sensitive men. But even they kind of fall into the trap of expectations. I mean, they both have very overbearing fathers, right?
Absolutely.
And they are unable to kind of protect or kind of stand up for the women in their life when they see, they're like, hey, I get that it's unfair that you have to do all this, but why rock the boat? Why make things complicated? And I think that that's so much of the messaging that we hear in real life is women also, ki beta, just come on, just do it. It's okay. Like, it's okay. Just adjust. And so how we, in that adjust, we kind of erode our own sense of who we are and our own sense of dignity, how we want to live our lives, because we're constantly being asked to just bend a little. And then finally, you're just kind of like this, you're just completely closed down because all your life you've been told to do that. So it affects, like I said, it really affects men and women both. And it's wrong to think that, patriarchy is just harming women and it's not harming men as well.
Absolutely, which I really understood from Jay's character too, and Veer's character.
Yeah.
I also love the title. When I actually took up the book, and I hadn't even started a page yet, but when I looked at the title, A Mirror Made of Rain, it automatically made me think of so many interpretations of what a mirror symbolizes, right? And then when I read the book, there's this beautiful running metaphor of this mirror in so many different places that you've spoken about during all these conflicts and issues. So I'd like to know, was that metaphor developed organically when you were writing, and then that inspired the title, or how does that work? How do you go about actually choosing a title for the book that fits perfectly?
Yeah, the title is actually a really interesting story because it was and this is where a good editor kind of really steps in and makes or breaks a novel, because when I was working with my editor at HarperCollins India, he kind of noticed this that Numi there was this thing of mirror. The metaphor mirrors existed, and it was like Numi is constantly looking at herself in a mirror. She doesn't want to look at herself in a mirror. And so he kind of started thinking, let's heighten this. I see. And it was incredible because until he mentioned it, I didn't notice it at all.
Really?
Okay. Yeah. And
so it was very organically woven into your story, in a sense.
Yeah. And then I was like, what, you're right. And then the more we started talking about it, the more sense it started to make. And so I kind of heightened that metaphor. And then, we ran through a whole bunch of options of mirror made of rain cloud mirror, and many, many, many things with the word mirror in it, which other side of the mirror. So it was very tough. And then finally, I came because of the whole the way that the book ends. I was like, well, mirror made of rain sounds beautiful, and it also kind of makes sense for the book. And that's how it became. But really, when it started out, it was we were in a completely different direction title wise, and then it was really my editor who kind of felt. And that's one thing that doesn't get talked enough about a book, is that how many people go into the making of it.
Totally.
It really takes a village to kind of get a book from a conception all the way to actually in the hands of a reader. And the writer, as a writer, you may be kind of the captain of the ship, or you may be holding the wheel in your hands, but it's really so many people who are kind of doing everything else to kind of sail the ship in the right direction, if I may continue with that slightly silly metaphor.
No,
but it really is it's really interesting.
That's lovely. Because the title really actually intrigued me, and it was beautiful. The metaphor was just beautiful throughout, and my favorite part of that metaphor was right at the end, where you mentioned that a daughter's first mirror is her mother. That kind of encapsulated everything that you were trying to say about this self-destructive cycle that both Numi and Asha go through. It was lovely. To talk a little bit more about this team of people that it takes to bring out a novel. Do you have conflicts about when you edit, and you've written a passage, and maybe your editor says, no, that kind of doesn't fit into it, but you're like, no, that absolutely is something that I've put my heart and soul into. I mean, how does that work? How do you resolve these kind of conflicts?
Yeah, I think that it boils down to a question of taste. So I think I'm very lucky in terms of that my taste for my prose and my editor's tastes are kind of on the same page, kind of dovetail. So there was never really a point where, maybe once or twice, where it was like, oh, I want to keep this in, and they were like, no, we should take this out. But it was always just a word or two. But it was always I mean, it's lovely to have that kind of feeling where you can run to your editor and say, hey, look what even while we were editing,
Right.
we would share poems, or we would share, other things, other pieces of prose, or, stuff that inspired. And it was always lovely to have that moment where we both like, oh yeah, this is really incredible. And like, this is really good writing. So we both kind of had the same sense of what we thought is good writing or good, good literature.
Mm-hmm.
And that really helps, because if you have a completely different set of expectations or different idea of what literature should be, then the person that you're working with, because you're really working very closely with this person. At least in my case, it was that you're really working like almost, you're almost kind of tied and yoked together. And I would say it's as much my editor's book as it is my book in that sense.
Yeah, I think a lot of writers would also agree with that, when it comes to the editors. Yes.
Yeah, I really feel like I really feel a sense of like sharing. I just a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed this Irish poet who has written this just absolutely gorgeous book about an oral poem. And we were talking about the oral tradition of poetry, and so the oral tradition is basically a poem is never written down, or a piece of writing it's passed on. And so there was this whole question of like, well, if it's going to be passed on through generations, then it'll be corrupted, because every person is going to change it or kind of alter it, because
their own
human nature. Yeah. But like when you think of a written text, also there's so many hands that go into it at the end of it. You can't really say it belongs to just one person or one individual, maybe taking like maybe the author and sitting there, but it really belongs to so many people. And I'm really keen to share that authorship, or that sense of ownership of the text, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's lovely. So that is that's really nice to hear about, the collaboration between the different people who, apart from the author who help out with the book. I also want to talk about a little bit about your writing style, which I really enjoyed. It is very visually rich, and there's a lot of imagery about places, people, and it's a tough read, but at the same time, it's very accessible and very relatable. It's not something that goes above your head. Like for me, I'm someone who I don't want to be looking at a thesaurus every 5 minutes or a dictionary every 5 minutes. If I'm not, that isn't what constitutes a good book for me. And secondly, a good book is something that I pick up and I finish in one shot. For me, this ticked both those boxes. The novel ticked both those boxes because I found your style very easy and relatable, in spite of the subject matter being very tough, and deep. So I'd like to know about some of your writing influences, authors who've inspired you when you were young, and also later on, people who kind of set you on this path of becoming an author.
Yeah, it's funny. Every time someone asks me that question, and I have so many, like if I go to my library right now, I have so many books that I can pull out and just, but the minute I'm asked that question, I always completely blank out.
It's
like,
difficult, yeah, because
wait,
there are so many.
Who do I?
Can I kind of guess?
One? Sure, yeah.
Okay, so for me, when I read, especially when I looked at the relationship between Jay and Numi, brought up images of Atticus Finch and Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird. Am I right in saying that, they were kind of similar characters from To Kill a Mockingbird?
It's so interesting because I never thought of To Kill a Mockingbird as an obvious influence.
Okay.
But I read it more than once, in my formative years. And I guess there is a lot of I definitely was drawn to that character of Atticus. So I think that there was a lot of it that kind of rubbed off on me. But that's one of the cases where you don't even realize you're being...
Realize it. That's lovely. It's very organic.
It's very organic. So you're not really setting out to say that, I'm going to be writing this. I want to create an Atticus Finch for my book,
Okay.
but
Okay.
it's one, I guess it's one of the cases where a character kind of stays with you, and then you just,
Feels unconsciously. Yeah.
appears unconsciously in, and I think that's really lovely and really interesting in
Yes.
terms of like really obvious, I mean, purposeful influences. Nabokov, I read a lot of Nabokov.
Okay.
I read his Speak Memory was for me a kind of grounding text. I
Mhm.
read Lolita also a couple of times to just get that, especially that part
Right.
where of Numi and Ammu's brother and all,
Yes.
to understand how that, to make that seem like organic. And
Yes.
then there were a lot of non-fiction books I read to understand grief, to understand complicated mother-daughter relationships.
Okay.
So there was a lot, not just fiction, but a lot of non-fiction also, kind of like Philip Roth's Patrimony, which is his book about his father. I found that really gorgeous. Max Potter's Grief is a Thing with Feathers, which is a very small book, but absolutely fantastic. And then there was this fabulous book called An Abbreviated Life by Ariel Levy. And it's about her, so it's about the writer's relationship with her mother, and her mother is again a very flawed, very complicated. Her mother is a very famous poet.
Okay.
And it's about this woman's relationship with her and how it was, like her recounting her life. And so it was like, because sometimes like the abuse, the relationship with the mother is not bad, in like she's not being beaten up, or like things like that are not happening, but it's how subtle it is, and how much of it is down to memory and how you remember things versus how things actually happen. And like there was this other fantastic book that I read about, it's called If You Kept a Record of Sins, by this Italian writer called Andrea Baiani.
Okay.
And he writes about, his main character has a strange relationship with his mother. And what I realize is that, what we think of as memories are really just, are colored by are almost corrupted by our emotions. Like we don't have, you might remember something a certain way, but if you go back in time, it may not have happened that way, or it may not have happened in the sequence you remember. So there's so many times when a child goes up to their parent and says, hey, do you remember how you did this to me and how mean you were and what happened? And the parent is like, no, that's absolutely not how I remember it. Like I remember something completely. So it's all about like really whose memory you can rely on, or how you perceive, and that's another reason why I didn't want Numi to be a complete victim, because who can say that she's remembering everything exactly as it happened, right?
True. Absolutely. And also this brings me to, those little flashback segments that you write, that Numi remembers throughout the book. And those portions, some of them can actually be like essays on their own, like those portions actually you could like probably write them as articles in, something else, not necessarily a novel. So I'd be interested to know how you actually structured, those scenes when you were writing. In the sense, did you write a lot of those flashbacks separately and then kind of brought them into the story as you went along, or was it like a kind of a chronological process?
So structure, for this, my debut novel, structure is something I struggled with a lot. And plot and structure are something that it's, I wish it was as easy as just sitting down and like, this happened and this happened and this happened, but
it doesn't work that way.
It's like composing a piece of music, so you have to have the melody right, and you have to have things happening. And it's some people are really good at it. I am not good at it at all.
Okay. It doesn't seem like that from the way you've written it.
Yeah, and that's because I had a wonderful editor. who was really like, he was like conducting the orchestra and being like, okay, now this, now violins, now bassoon, now cello, this is how
Bring
we're
in
going to
this.
do it. Bring it all in together. I can
Okay.
play every individual instrument, but don't ask me to kind of figure out how to, but
Make it an ensemble.
do an ensemble. And really, that's a different skill set, and that's something I'm hoping I'm going to be able to develop and learn, because I learned so much just with just by writing. You learn so much. And I think that when it came to those flashbacks, really you think of a flashback as each instrument playing, and then how you're going to bring it all together in harmony and make it sound beautiful. That's again trial and error. And definitely there were, there were things that needed to be switched around. And there's this amazing software called Scrivener, which I used for a bit. I mean, I used a couple of different things, but for a while I was using this software. It kind of lets you take sections and kind of move them around.
Oh, lovely.
So you can be like, oh, this maybe fits better here. And then, transitioning without getting really technical and boring everyone. Transitioning into a flashback is really difficult. And to be on, I mean, this, and to be really honest, God of Small Things. She's miraculous at how she weaves in flashbacks
into the
because
story.
It can get really boring also for the reader. Like, oh my God, now why are we going like 30 years back into this person's life? Like, please. So you have to kind of do it organically enough, or like, have enough sleight of hand that the reader's not feeling like, why is this going?
Why is this suddenly here? Yeah,
I'm bored. Like, how to keep the reader's interest, kind of like trick them and string them along and say, oh no, come, let's proceed this also, and then we'll come back. So that it really takes a lot of skill, and it's not easy. It's not easy.
But it seemed really seamless, because a lot of those flashbacks actually gave me personally an insight into why Numi and Asha were reacting the way they were. So it fit in really well. And also, were you always wanting to write this novel in the first person through the eyes of Numi, or did you think that you could write it in a third person kind of a structure? Because I felt that it was also more personal and it had more depth because Numi was speaking. Did you go back and forth about that?
Yeah, it's funny. It's also about literary traditions or literary fashions or trends or something.
Okay.
When I started writing in the MFA program back in 2014, everyone was writing first person. Everyone was just writing first person narratives. And I was like, and coming from India, and my whole thing was, I always read in third person. I didn't even know this first person thing.
Yes.
So it was very uncommon for me, but it was very common here to be writing. So actually, I first started off writing in third person, close third person. And I wrote the entire book in close third person.
Wow. Okay.
And then someone suggested, what? I feel like you will have more access to this character's feelings if you write in first. So I said, okay. So then I wrote the whole book in first.
Oh, that was an amazing choice. I would say. I would say that.
Yeah. So, I tried both, and then I kind of, I kind of juxtaposed or balanced. I was like, where am I feeling more connection to the character's voice? Because it's a voice driven, it's a voice driven novel, right? It's not really driven.
Exactly.
It's really driven by this main protagonist voice. So the voice had to come out very clear. And it turned out that it was clearer in first person rather than third. So close third. So I said, okay, I mean, but it's definitely something that I'm probably not going to write. The next thing I write is not going to be in first person, because first person is also very limiting, because then you're limited to one character's perspective and ideas, and the whole thing is driven by one voice.
Yes.
And I think it would be really interesting to introduce more voices into a text. But in this case, I think this is the best voice for this.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. And you were talking about the US edit of Mirror, which is yet to come out, if I'm right.
Yeah.
will be coming out in the coming year?
In May.
In May. So what were the kind of changes that you were actually thinking about for, because now you also live in a global community, and in a sense you're also writing for global viewers. So what are the tweaks that you were thinking of, what kind of edits were you thinking of to make it more accessible to a global audience?
Well, the edits that I was thinking of was not really in terms of accessibility, because I made a decision very early on that I'm not going to explain or not going to culturally contextualize anything for
which is what I wanted to ask, because this fabric of this Indian society is so relatable to us, but it may not necessarily reach a Western audience, or may not be understandable to a Western audience.
Well, then without sounding conceited or sounding arrogant, I think that they can make that extra effort to understand. Because I think, like we grew up on a diet of English writers and American writers, and we read To Kill a Mockingbird, and we read Enid Blyton, but
nobody
we were never given
that to us. Yeah, exactly.
Nobody explained that to us.
Yeah.
There's this Aruni Kashyap is a poet I admire a lot, and he wrote this amazing piece about daffodils. And you remember when we were kids, we all learned that poem.
Daffodils. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and the first time I saw a daffodil was when I was like 36 years old. And I mean, we learned to we memorized this poem, and we were told it's a wonderful poem, and without any cultural context, without ever seeing that flower, without ever seeing that particular scene that they
understood it.
Yeah, but we understood it, and we were taught to appreciate it. And so much of literature has been like that for us. And I feel like it's really important for readers in the Western Hemisphere to kind of afford that same, do the same work when it comes to writers from the Southern or the Eastern Hemisphere, without having us like kind of sit and explain everything or contextualize everything or be like, this is like that. And I think that I've been fortunate enough that I've had early readers, and I've had an editor in the US also who totally gets that. Like, she's not the kind of person who would be like, oh, you need to explain this. And I think literature and translation has a big, translation as a form has become much more widespread and popular than it was before. And like now you really have like, you have writers like Han Kang, and you have writers like, you have so many writers who have been translated and have won big awards. Parasite, the movie Parasite. Absolutely. I mean, can you imagine a Korean movie winning an Oscar?
Yeah, like, it wasn't heard of at all.
It's unheard of, right? But that's where the world is. That's where we're going now. So the world is becoming more accepting of non-contextualized literature or writing. So I think that's...
Yeah, as it should be. I completely agree with your view. And, just a last question before we throw the session open to some questions from people who are watching. What are you working on next? Have you started working on a next novel, or is the idea already in your head? And what is it that you're excited about? Is it going to be something totally different, like a lighthearted story?
Yeah, I definitely put in a lot of, I think writing this particular debut novel was, I really put in a lot of heart and soul, not heart and soul, but I like really exhausted all my energy and I think whatever I do. So I've always been interested in speculative fiction. Like I love I love stories that are weird and odd and like that kind of go in unexpected places with unexpected characters. And I've always wanted to write something like that. But I didn't feel like I had the skills or I had the necessary, but now I feel a lot more confident. And, it's really like, it's like going through, writing a debut novel is like going through school, right? Like you spend 12 years in school. in novel school, and then now you have a much more developed sense of who you are as a writer and what you're able to do. So yeah, I think that's something along the line. I'm very interested in exploring. So I'm Parsi, and I've always been fascinated with the history of Parsis and like Rohinton mystery. I love Rohinton mystery, and I think that it's such a rich culture to kind of mine and talk about, even in the terms of speculative writing. So I really want to kind of go, but right now I'm still at the very early stages and just kind of experimenting and playing around. But I definitely have a much better idea of who I am and my style and my voice.
Wonderful. Looking forward to what you come up with. And thank you so much, Naheed, for being so forthcoming and candid. I absolutely loved this chat with you.
Thank you. I loved it too.
Thank you so much. And I'll throw it open to questions that anybody may like to ask. Naheed?
Okay.
So if anybody has questions, I think you can write in the Q&A box, and let's just give it a minute. I've been listening quite fascinated to your conversation, Naheed, and I think the world's kind of waiting after this debut, which has been a spectacular debut. I think the world's waiting, be it a speculative fiction set in sort of a Parsi background or anything else. The world's certainly waiting and waiting to see what comes out of your pen next.
That's really exciting. I'm really happy to, it's just such a thrill to share my work with readers, because really I did write it for readers. Like I didn't, and I feel so fortunate and so lucky to be able to do this. And I know so many people, like writing is such a perilous venture. It's like you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what you're going to come out with. So I really feel happy and very fortunate to be here today.
Absolutely are, because I think you're putting yourself out there, and you're not putting yourself out there in public. You're actually putting yourself in an intimate relationship with each reader, and that intimate relationship with each reader is very different from what it might be with another one. And I think I had that conversation with you when I spoke to you first. I almost put the book down because of where it was going. And I'm glad I persisted, because it ended up a place where it certainly seemed like it was going halfway during the novel.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And I think that's one of my favorite reactions from a reader. Like, obviously, I love it when they come and say, oh, I love the book. But I think my most favorite reaction from a reader is like when they say, well, I almost threw the book across the room, but then I stuck with it. And I'm very glad I did, because that's really makes me see that turning point. Or I feel like I've changed something, or the book has changed something in the way that the reader views the world. That they were just about to give up on it, but then they stuck with it. And that why you stuck with it, or why you continued reading is what interests me the most, or even if a reader puts it down, like why they did that, because I feel like that's the moment where you realize that there is something that you've taken away from the book, or the book has shown you something that in a different light that you probably were not. Maybe it was always there, present in your subconscious, but not really at the forefront of it, if you get what I'm saying.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I don't see any questions. So if Sharanya, you have any comments to sort of wrap up, and any final questions for Naheed, and I'd love to listen to Naheed's final thoughts on the session.
Yeah, so I think I've kind of covered what I wanted to ask you, but maybe just one more thing about the technical aspects of writing a novel. So when you talk about places and people that are distinctly identifiable, like a small town or a place like Delhi, or people that inhabit that world, You know, in a sense, it has. Does the writer have to actually have been part of that ethos, or having experienced that to actually be authentic, or can it be something straight out of one's imagination? You know, to create this world.
I think it's both. I think that some level of personal experience is also helpful, but I think that writers are so creative. And you know, like the other day, I saw on Twitter a writer mentioned that she was using Google Street View to walk around Venice because she had a scene set in Venice. But you know, obviously, like right now, nobody's traveling anywhere. But she was using she was using Google Street View to kind of get an authentic sense of, you know, what it looks like.
The city, the city. To actually write about it.
Wow, that's interesting. Isn't that interesting? And I think that's so many things. And you know, this writer I was once talking to, he said that, like, for example, you may never have gone to outer space, but you may have been trapped in an elevator at some point, or you may have been trapped in a small space. And so you can get that sense of claustrophobia. So there are ways to kind of extrapolate personal experience to a situation. And, you know, honestly, our memories, again, going back to the fact that memory is so flawed and fallible, that you may have gone to Delhi 10 years ago, but what you put down on the page you don't know what kind of Delhi is going to come out on the page. It's never going to be exactly what was there in your memory anyway, or you don't know how much you're going to remember. So, you know, saying that you have to really fully experience something to be able to write about it. Yeah. I think there are ways. That's where the imagination, that's where creativity comes in, right? Like you have a sense of an experience, and then you try to put it, and sometimes you fail, sometimes it's not accurate at all. And there will always be readers out there to point out to you that this is, you know, this is inauthentic. But that's a risk you take. Like every choice you know, that's why like writing is so risky, because you're really kind of asking to be corrected, or asking to be, like, you know, sorted out if you are not if you're you know, like it's really something that you have to just do.
Lovely. So thanks so much again, and I look forward to meeting you sometime. I would love to meet you in person. But
that would be awesome.
It's been a lovely chat, and thanks to both for the opportunity. Back to you.
And thank you both. It was wonderful. This was a session where we put a debut novelist with not another writer in conversation, but a reader. So it was very interesting to see a writer and a reader have a very nice, intimate, and detailed conversation about the book. Congratulations once again, Naheed. The book truly deserves to be, I mean, we're truly honored that the book is on our shortlist. We hope that there are many more recognitions and honors that come your way. Thank you for writing this book, and thank you so much for waking up early and doing this at a time that suits Indian audiences. The recording of the video should be on our YouTube channel in the next couple of days, and we will share those links with you. And like Sharanya said, I hope that our paths cross very soon again, and we're able to definitely, you know, have a cup of coffee and talk more.
I would love that. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute honor. It's been an absolute pleasure. You guys are really nice and really wonderful. And I hope the rest of the festival is also like a huge success with great conversations. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Good morning to you, and good evening to our Indian audience.
Bye-bye. Thank you.